Go ahead.
I'm so sorry, I can't see anyone.
Oh,
there we go. Hi, everyone. I hope everybody's having a lovely night. Thank you all so much for joining me. So my name is Dainty Smith, and this is our artist. I wanted to read really quickly what we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to read you literally from what we put up on our social media, just in case anybody was like, what are they talking about? What's going on? So tonight, this is the next event in our Push-Pull speaker event. And what I wanted us to speak about is the politics of seduction, desire, and the radicalized body. Here are the thoughts that we had when we had sat down to talk about push-pull a year ago. Actually, I think we've been working on this for 2 years now. So this baby has been growing for a while. But when we planned out what the year would look like, and we talked about the work that we wanted to do, and we did our workshops and our series, our artist talk series, and our showcases, I was really excited about this one. I'm excited about all of them, but I really wanted to talk. And so the politics of seduction, desire, and the radicalized body, Cabaret gives space to cultivate the audacity to highlight bodies as visible, valuable, and worth considering. To do that, we begin by imagining our bodies as important and worthy of being center stage. By performing and placing our bodies on center stage, we are addressing how race is sexualized in ways that implicate class, respectability, politics, and policing. So real, just lighthearted topics. Yeah, nothing too serious, nothing too serious. So we're going to be touching on a lot of those subjects or topics tonight, and I'm going to just say the names of my wonderful and fabulous artists that are joining us tonight, because I'm so excited that they're here. And I'll let them introduce themselves because I don't want to miss anything. So I just want to thank our incredible artists that took the time out to be with us for Push-Pull tonight. And I want to say thank you to Ravyn Wngz, Rania, also Violet Vixen, also known as Violet Vixen, Dolly Berlin, Ivory, and Zaddy. Incredible, incredible artists. I'm really looking forward to everything that you will be saying. Would you like to say your names and say what you do? Just a mini bio. Anyone can go first, or I'll say the name like a teacher. Ravyn, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll go. I'll keep popcorning your names, and we'll go from there.
I don't think Ravyn can hear you.
Okay. Kat, do you want to introduce yourself and just say the bio, and then we'll keep it going? There's no business like show business, folks. So we've had a couple of glitches, but we are all excited to be here, and the show is happening. The show is going on. Kat, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, so my name is Zaddy. I am a burlesque performer as well as a pole dancer. I'm pretty new to the space. I've only been doing pole and burlesque for 2 or 3 years now, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you so so much. Thank you, Kat. Dolly Berlin, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about who you are?
Absolutely. So my name's Dolly Berlin. I've been performing for just over a decade. Yeah, for 7 years, up until Corona, I was running a weekly show, which was super fun. A lot of opportunity to meet a lot of different faces from all over the place. Really miss it. But yeah, I'm now a student and working on some other avenues of artistic expression and the odd Zoom show here and there still.
Thank you, Dolly. Rania, also known as Sweet Delilah, also known as Violet Vixen. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Dainties. My name is Rania, and in my baby burlesque career, I'm Violet. I'm an artist, and in the burlesque aspect of my practice is the youngest aspect there. I'm really. You can't hear me? Can you hear me?
Hear her. Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you.
Ivory, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I don't think Dainty can hear us.
Okay, so I could.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Happy to tell you about myself. I could hear Rania there, so I'm not sure if we're having a connection issue or the tech gods aren't with us tonight. But I could hear, so I'm not sure what's happening. But I'll jump in for now. Hi, everyone. I'm Ivory. I'm a Toronto-based singer, actor, model, dancer, fire breather, and plus-size artist. I have been performing like 16 years now, maybe longer. I'm not sure. It's really hard to count. Across multidisciplinary of platforms. Basically, anywhere the work was, I went after it. And I think that's the easiest way to have a storied career. It's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight.
Okay, thank you so much. And I just want to say to our patient audience, thank you for being really patient with us. Mercury has gone into retrograde very clearly. And so we've had a couple of glitches that have never happened the entire time we've been running this festival. But of course, tonight, we've been having some issues. So I just want to thank all of the folks that have joined us. And I just want to let you all know, I really appreciate your patience and your kindness and just being with us as we ride this through. We are so sorry that these tech issues are happening, and we are doing everything within our power to work them out. So just thank you for bearing with us. We really appreciate it. All right. I'm wondering if Rania can hear me and would like to give a little introduction.
I can definitely hear you. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I'm glad you can hear me, folks. So as I was saying earlier, my name is Rania, and in my baby burlesque career, I go by Violet. I am a multidisciplinary artist and community organizer. I've been a frontline community organizer and a working artist for about 15 years. My practice is mostly text-based and stage-based, theater-based performances. However, I have been dabbling. It's been a remarkable opportunity to bring some of the earlier aspects of my practice and also my experiences on the sex work spectrum into a performative space. So I am really grateful to be sharing a space with so many people whose work I admire and whose bodies and lives are shaped by a lot of the same experiences that shape mine in some spaces that diverge. And I look very much forward to learning from and hearing what everyone else has to say.
Thank you so much, Rania. Ravyn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the internet gods not with us. My name is Ravyn. I am here in Takaranto. I'm excited to be here in this conversation. I'm an Afro-Indigenous Two-Spirit trans woman, and my burlesque work is largely about reminding people of what I feel like they have forgot or are not paying attention to. I've been performing for about 19 years now, and started off with hip hop and African dance, and moved into ballet and jazz, and fell in love with burlesque as an art form of storytelling and of consent, and really developed my artistic language and voice. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Ravyn. Okay, so yeah, I'm at this point, I'm just repeating myself, but I really cannot thank all of you enough. So I just want to extend thanks again to everybody that's working really hard, tirelessly behind the scenes, the Push-Pull team. I want to thank the artists that are here and being really patient with us. And I want to thank the audience that have joined. And I'm just going to send out a prayer that the tech gods will have mercy on us, because I know Mercury's in retrograde, but for the love of God, help a sister out. And we're going to keep going. So one of the things that I always say when I talk about burlesque is, when we talk about burlesque, what we're really talking about is the politics of desirability. And I wanted to ask anyone who feels like are woven into that, or do you feel that they are?
Would you mind repeating, just because you cut out just a little bit in the middle?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that I always say is, when we talk about burlesque, what we're really talking about is the politics of desirability. So I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts on the politics of desirability pertaining to burlesque? Do you think that desirability and politics are intertwined in burlesque? Do you think that the two come together?
If I may take an attempt at it, and then I will leave it to my kin here on this panel to take it up. I think desire is always political, no matter what space it's in. I think in the context of burlesque, because it's sitting inside this exchange of desire for money, right? It's sitting inside like a one of the fringe edges of the sex work spectrum, and it exists there. I think there's definitely, wherever money is involved, there are economic, political, racial, and colonial systems at play. But I think fundamentally, all desire is political, because we've been conditioned inside really racial, colonial, and deeply transmisogynist systems to think of desire as an external thing, right? That like desire is external. And it's really interesting, because once you, like, for me, I can speak only from my experience or my place in the world as a Black woman, and as a Black queer femme especially, that you should be grateful for being desired, you should seek to be desired. And unfortunately, desire in that context often means being like chewed up and spit out. That's what happens to be desired. It's to be looked at, but not to be seen. And what's really interesting is that you realize desire is political, because once desire becomes, when you recognize the ways in which desire is also internal, like self-desire is a political act. As like a fat, queer, Black femme, I'm told that I'm only desirable in certain contexts or for certain aspects of myself. So this kind of fragmentation happens. And so if I dare to desire myself, I don't need you to desire me. I desire me, right? And I think that's one of those things that burlesque grounds you in. You can't desire yourself. You can't sell it to anybody else. It's very difficult to do that, right? So like, if I can seduce me, I can seduce you. And so fundamentally, it's kind of a rejection of the things that you're told to dislike about yourself, and I think that's fundamentally political. I also think the ways in which we exchange desire and seduction in the world, outside of like formal money transactions, are also political. right? Like there's like all sorts of contexts in which like, you know, sometimes I joke like I'll seduce you into freedom if I have to, right? But it's true in my practice as a social justice educator, everything from my face to my nails to the way that I dress help somebody who doesn't want to listen to me just a little bit longer, right? And then I bargain and trade and desire in that way too. So I think those are kind of my initial thoughts, and I want to hear what other folks have to say.
Thank you, Rania. I appreciate that. Anyone else have anything to say?
I think that reclaiming sexuality is a political act. I totally agree with you, Rania. And I think that reclaiming our bodies is a political act. And especially if you belong to a marginalized group or several marginalized groups, like many of us on this panel do, every single time you decide to reclaim your sexuality, reclaim desire, and for yourself, and also moving it into your art and displaying it for the world to see, I think that that is inherently political, because in a world that tells us that we're not desirable, that we are unseen, or we are there to be consumed, as you said, Rania, we're there to be consumed and then spat out, to hold on to that, to change it into something that we actually have the power over, is inherently political. I think that there's no way for the two to exist without each other, and I think it's revolutionary, really.
I'll add just one more thing. Thank you both for your brilliance. Really got my brain kind of twirling in different directions. But when I think about politics for a minute, I feel like people think of politics as this thing that only certain Martin Luther Kings are allowed to claim. And I think that, you know, when you are really paying attention to history, we're in Black History Month, when you're really paying attention to how we got to this place that we're in now, I think that some of the most revolutionary figures and people that I know of are sex workers and trans women. Um, so the politics of desirability, I feel like the politics itself is fighting for the act of living, simply because we're in this white supremacist soup, and utilizing the weapon of glamour to tell our stories, to make ourselves real on stage, and to ourselves in personhood. For me, I've always said as a trans woman that it was completely revolutionary for me to focus on vanity for myself, to really focus on beauty, and to redefine what that was for me as a person who doesn't have a gender destination, but is excited by the lushness of the different ways that people claim themselves in space and on stage, and for consumption. I think it's a very powerful tool.
I actually really love what you just said about how some of us can't be Martin Luther King. When you said that in your response, I thought that was really powerful. I have not heard that before. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what that means to say a statement like that.
Sure, I can unpack it a little bit. There are ways that we've been taught and raised to believe that only certain people are allowed to speak, and be listened to, and women are not those people. Gender nonconforming folks, trans folks, indigenous folks are not those people who should be heard or listened to or cared for, which is why we're in the situation that we're in. But there are certain people throughout history who have been sort of made into these monuments, as these unbelievable heroes who are made of something different than the rest of us. But when I think of Senator John Lewis, who recently passed away in 2020, I think about him being 19 years old on that bridge in that march. And so they were babies, essentially, you know, fighting for their lives, and they had to like radicalize their thought, um, radicalize their bodies, and use themselves and their community mindsets. Women were thinking about education, from freedom schools to like newspapers to ways to get information across, right? And so I think that we only look at one figure as the idea of being political or an activist or an abolitionist. But Harriet Tubman was a mad Black woman who was an abolitionist, right? And so um, that's what I mean by, like, in terms of history. If people are really paying attention to how we got here, we'll see that it was a gay Black man who taught Martin Luther King about nonviolence, and you know, and who planned the March on Washington, right? And so, and it was Mahalia Jackson who was the person when Martin Luther King was doing his speech, said, "Hey, Martin, tell him about the dream," and that's when he started to freestyle, "I have a dream." Otherwise, that might not have happened. And so we find ourselves in this place where there's so many new faces of revolution who radicalized ourselves. And I think it's important to recognize the way that everyone does it in different ways.
I do appreciate you touching on that, and thank you for your brilliance again, because you're amazing and a goddess. And that actually leads me to something else that I wanted to ask folks about, which is desirability and all of its complexities. I'm curious as to what your thoughts on how value is attached to people and to persons and bodies, and the risk of fetishization, and if that's just something that just happens and we don't have control over it, or if that's just a given. Like, you know, based on everything that Ravyn has just said, it feels as though the answer is yes. Like, it feels as though we get to get liberated and we get to get freedom, but the risk is fetishization. The risk is how people value us and value our bodies.
Oh God, what do I do? Might get into fetishization a little bit afterwards. Just sort of in regards to the two questions, sort of melded together, and with what everyone else has said, I feel that it's sort of twofold. I see and I experience a lot of really wonderful interactions with people who are who've been carving out their own stages. Like you, for example, Dainty, you've like created this entire section of the burlesque community that's really wonderful. But at the same time, we're still fighting against mainstream notions of what desirability is. We're still fighting for venue owners that tell us, you know, they don't want that body on stage. They don't want this kind of person on stage. They don't want that kind of act on stage. So it is very interesting. It's still tough out there. And I feel like a lot of us sell this idea of like of being a fantasy, and a lot of people really love it. They buy it. Like an average woman can just throw on a bunch of makeup and costumes and she really sells it. But at the same time, she's still also fighting for, like, you have to fight just to get into a venue in the city. So it is interesting in that way. And I do think that plays into fetishization, wherein, yes, we want this, we want burlesque, but we want it to look this way, we want it to look that way, we want to use this theme or that theme. That I'm kind of talking in circles, but
oh, it's all good. It's all good stuff.
I do think that it's very interesting to see the twofoldedness of it, and how many folks are very much carving out this space for themselves to be desirable, and to be desirable not only to themselves but to others, but then also still needing to really, really put in a lot of work outside of the stage.
Yeah, I think that it's complicated, right? Like what I experience on stage as a Black woman is this tremendous sense of safety, ironically enough. You know, it means that for a particular space of time, I have control and I can dominate that room, that stage, that environment, and I have a say, I have agency over my body, and I don't really get that anywhere else. What's intertwined with that is being a Black woman on that stage, and what does that mean? So I think that it is complicated, right? And I really loved a lot of what Ravyn said in terms of who gets to be seen. There's something called the penguin effect. And I'm not going to explain this metaphor well enough, but this idea that like we're all sort of out in the cold, and that everybody has to take a turn and put somebody in the center so they can speak. And I think that based on like in agreement with what Ravyn said, it's this idea that only certain people get pushed to the center, right? If we're all out in the cold and there's a spotlight, only certain people get pushed into the center so that they can speak. And there's a complicatedness in that perhaps no matter how or who gets shoved in there, being valued based on your body and how you look, being fetishized is going to come with it. I think maybe that's something I'm wondering.
I think that sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So no, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I just interrupted folks. It's okay. We're working through this. Again, no business like show business. Because we've been having so many technological glitches, and I just want to make sure that you're all supported and that we have a good show and a good artist talk. We're actually going to take an intermission, and then we're just going to switch to a different format so that things can run a bit smoothly. So hold your response, and then we're going to carry on the show. Thank you all so much. Okay, so we're back. We're gonna call this take 2, or maybe take 10, or maybe take 5,000. But once again, I thank you all so much for your patience. And I really extend my heartfelt thanks to the artists that have showed up tonight and to our audience. So I just want to thank you all for being patient with us. And I want to reassure folks that we had a smooth ship running until right about tonight when we hit some rocks. But that's okay. No business like show business. We're going to keep the talk going. So what we were talking about before we did a quick little mini break and switched over and put the train back on the tracks was being valued, and what does that look like, and being fetishized, and is it the same thing? Is there a danger in that it is going to happen, that that it comes with what it means to be in the spotlight and taking up space? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll speak on this a bit. For me personally, it's always been like this big conflict because of course, when you're performing, you have that agency and you're making the choices you're making to be presented how you want to be presented. But I always have this kind of conflict where I want to do certain things that make me happy, but then I'm also in my mind kind of considering how that'll be perceived, and if I want to perpetuate all of whatever stereotypes the viewer is, conjuring up in their mind that come naturally to them. So like, as a Black femme, it's expected that you'll be twerking and, you know, dancing in that manner and stuff like that. And I love doing that. But it's always conflicting to me because I want to do that kind of thing, but I don't want people to put Black femmes in that box and to continue to just see us as that and be like, oh yeah, well, of course she would do that because that's what they do, you know?
Yeah, I love what you just said. And I want to jump on that to say that, you know, there has been an ongoing conversation within the pornography industry in which white pornography performers receive a completely different existence in that realm. Everything based on how they're lit, how they're marketed and promoted, the lingerie that they wear, it looks like this, you know, I don't know, a cosmopolitan, like this beautiful blowouts. They're in these gorgeous settings. They're usually, you know, in a beautiful, lovely hotel room, even wearing some gorgeous lingerie, and then two women go at it, and it's great, it's wonderful, okay. But when we watch Black porn performers, what I notice, and the conversations that I have been privy to witness, is that it's not the same. It's not the same at all. And so when you're promoting and marketing performers who are in the porn industry who are Black, suddenly it's ghetto bitches or ratchet, or see these two girls and they're in some seedy club, or, you know, they're behind bars or something, you know. And I think that that's part of it too, is that just, is it based on just being in our bodies that we're inherently fetishized, that we have no power over that? Or again, it just comes with the territory in terms of the messages we are trying to give to the world, the art that we are producing and creating, the space that we're taking up with. Is it a constant, and pardon the dad joke here, but is it a constant push-pull where, I'm so sorry, folks, I had to do it. I had to. This whole night has been one glitch after another. And if you think there's tea in this teacup, well, you got another thing coming. I just wonder if there is a, you know, if it's just, that's just the way it is, in that it's just a constant back and forth. And the tension is that being in a Black body and being in a trans body and being in an Indigenous body means that we're forever going to be working and performing and speaking back to that.
I don't know, Dainty. I don't know about forever, first of all. I don't like to deal in absolutes, okay? I remember you once calling me and you're like, are we going to make it? And I was like, we have no choice but to make it. That's what we're going to do because that's the only choice, right? I want to sort of challenge this idea that we're always speaking to, or that we're pointing towards the center that is white supremacy and whiteness. That's the place we're all speaking to, reacting to, constructing things against. I really want to challenge that. I want to say no, right? I want to say, yeah, of course, I live in a state of double consciousness, like Du Bois calls it. I see my eyes through my own eyes. I see my eyes through the eyes of white supremacy. I'm walking in a store. I know damn well my ass is not shoplifting, okay? But why am I like making sure my hands are not in my pocket, right? My bag is zipped. I'm like walking around like this, making sure that like my hands can be seen at all times. Because I know I don't think I'm stealing, but I know other people are looking at me. Maybe they think I'm stealing. So there's this constant like state of double consciousness. But at the same time, I also think burlesque allows us a space to potentially escape from that. Everything happens inside the white supremacist ocean we live in. Welcome to this water. It's the, you know, cishet, capitalist, ableist, white supremacist ocean. It sucks. I hate it here, but here we are, okay? So inside that ocean, of course, everything we make is speaking to those realities or those existences, but not necessarily as a direct response or as a direct divergence. So what I think it's interesting is like, there is the consciousness of like, I don't want to twerk because that's what people are going to expect me to twerk, right? But at the same time, when I think about Black people and twerking, I look at that and I see like Sudanese traditional dancing in that mood. I see West African dance styles in that. And I won't let people kick me out of my own skin. Right? So that's the side of it. It's like, yes, I can twerk. And sometimes I will twerk and I will break out into a poem. And sometimes I will get on stage and I will get dressed instead of undressed. And you will still pay me. Okay, you will. As in, I'm here to do something on my terms. And I think it's like in a state of constant hyper visibility. And I'm sure that that looks different for a lot of people on this panel. And I definitely want to hear from Ravyn around this particularly. But like looking at the state of hypervisibility that all Black people, particularly Black women and femmes, live inside of, I am being watched constantly, surveilled, seen, looked at, consumed, admired, hated. And I would rather do that on my terms and get paid for it. I would rather, and like, frankly, like when I get on stage, I literally choose so much of how you see me. Right? I don't choose that on my walk to the grocery store, but on stage, I literally curate every aspect of my existence, and that allows me some kind of freedom. So I want to challenge the idea that we're all pointing towards this Mecca that is non-existent for us, or that it's singular, or that it's Eurocentric. And I'm going to hand it over to someone who's ready.
I totally agree, and I'm going to jump in here just because Kat and I had sort of both gone for this one and talked to each other. Thing that we are constantly contending with. And sometimes being fetishized has led me to be able to have opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise, especially as a plus size body. I found a lot of my early gigs as a model doing runway, or a lot of my earlier gigs on the club scene was at parties for BBW lovers. And hey, I'm not going to kink shame anybody, and I'm glad that there's a community that just loves us fat women. I'm here for it. But I can't lie, after doing that circuit for a period of time, it was exhausting because it was another way of erasure. It was all of a sudden erasing who I am as a person, and then sort of hyper focusing on my fatness, which in every other scenario, I was supposed to downplay. Now, through years sort of tolerance into different communities, I do find there's ways that it enables us to take the stage, and then once we're there, absolutely flip the script on how these people or audiences are perceiving us or receiving us now that we're there. It's almost like, yeah, okay, boobs. Now that I've got your attention, XYZ. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's a thin line. It's a strange balance that we're always kind of doing, because there's part of me that says, yeah, fetishize me. There's another part of me that says, yeah, this is borderline sex work. This is sex work light. You know, there's so many things that people refer to the burlesque community as. And fuck yeah, oops. Heck yeah, I want you to feel sexy things about me and to fetishize me. And then there's part of me that says not in that way. And I think that's to quote Dainty, it's that constant push-pull, finding ways to use that fetishization to our benefit, to catapult us into the spotlight, to catapult us onto stages that otherwise wouldn't allow us into venues and working relationships with clients that otherwise wouldn't receive us. And then once we're there, busting the door wide open and bringing all our friends. You know what I mean?
I love everything that Rania and Ivory said. So much yes to all of that. I really appreciate it. And I think that perhaps there is really, the answer is yes, it's complicated. And then maybe the answer is also, but so what, right? Like perhaps the answer to that, to the question I asked is just that. Yes, it's complicated. Also, so what? And that maybe it's okay. maybe it's okay that it's complicated. Maybe it's in that complicatedness we are still achieving our freedom. We are still achieving our liberation. We are still paying our bills. We are still saying how much we want to take off or how little. We are still reclaiming or changing the narratives. And so maybe it is as simple as that. And I appreciate the radical joy around that, the radical sort of joyful revolution that says this is what the revolution will look like. It'll be femme, and it'll be fat, and it'll be indigenous, and it'll be black, and it'll be disabled, and it's going to be all of these beautiful things, you know, and whatever fetishizing comes with it, perhaps in some ways that's also like not even my business or your business, right? If our work as artists and storytellers and performers is to just keep pushing that needle, you know, and keep doing the work, then maybe we don't even have time. We don't have time to talk back to that sort of oppressive pressure or narrative that's telling us who or what we should be anyway, because our work and our existence isn't about that. So I really appreciate that. And thank you, Rania. I did call Rania one time, and you know, I had a tender Scorpio moment, and that was literally our conversation. I had said, you know, do you think we're gonna make it? And in true Aquarian fashion, you know, I will remind you all that Rania said that and like didn't even move a muscle in her face, like no facial expression. She just said, yes, we have no choice. So if you want somebody to like maybe, you know, play poker, you know, get Rania to do that. You know, I think she'd be really good. So something that I've also been thinking about is ableism and disability, and does that factor in? Does that factor into what is sexy, what is beautiful, and what is desirable? You know, particularly if you move through the world with an invisible illness, then you don't necessarily look sick. And then what does it mean to perform sexuality or sexiness on stage? Usually for a mixed crowd, right? Like when you perform as a person with invisible illness or with a disability in front of a queer audience, generally speaking, there's a warmth and acceptance there that says, we've got you, we've got you, we've got you. But that's not always the case if you're performing for a mixed crowd in which queer folks or straight folks or wherever you are on the spectrum are all in that space, in that bar together. And that's not always necessarily the case if you're just in front of a straight crowd on a Friday night. And so my question to you is, do you think that, you know, invisible illness or illnesses in any capacity and disability factor into what is sexy, and does it help change people's minds? Does it affect people's minds? Is it part of the conversation when we talk about desirability at all?
I would love to jump in on that and say this. Like, it was what I was gonna say about fetishization. And I feel like when we craft our own spaces, when we create our own narratives on stage, we are often faced with this work that is not actually ours to do, which is it's not my work to end racism. That's the people who actually need it. I don't need racism, right? I don't need white supremacy. These aren't things that existed in our cultures before. You know, there was a time where we didn't have white supremacy, you know what I mean? And so we get to own all of our truths, all of our messiness on stage and in public. But I feel like what we're dealing with in the burlesque industry is also what we're dealing with in the streets, in politics, in the closed door rooms of Fortune 500 companies, right? So and so it's a larger context. We are in an ableist world, right? An ableist, sexist, supremacist world where, you know, I've been thinking about so much of my own practices. I'll just get personal. My own practices of how I can challenge myself to actually be more available to everyone who exists, not just the people who I get along with, not just people who I'm used to seeing. You know, so it's like, who is not in the room should be the question, and how do we actually prepare for people to show up, you know? So we always sort of wait until people say, hey, I need ASL to provide it, or, oh, hey, there's a Black person in the space, maybe we should do anti-Black racism training, you know, instead of creating spaces and facilities and programs and all these kinds of things that expect people to show up. And so you're already at the root, preparing for everyone who is mobility device, non-mobility device, all disabilities. And then there's this conversation about mental illness and mental wellness. And I would love us to switch that sort of framing. What is mental illness? Like, it doesn't actually exist, right? And it only exists because of white supremacy and capitalism. And so if we were actually focusing on the wellness of everyone, then we would allow people to exist in the way that they actually function. And so, so everyone gets to be sexy, and everyone gets to be strong and a leader, and speak for themselves in the way that they speak, in the language that they speak. How many of us moved to Canada or moved to different places in our lives and had to change the way we speak in certain areas? You know, there's so much navigation that we find ourselves doing. There's so much work that I don't think is ours anymore. In 2021, I'm like, that's not my job. I'm done. I'm exhausted, and other people are on vacation. And I was like, well, this pandemic has not allowed me to rest. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been working my ass off. And so, you know, Dr. Michaela Angela Davis, she said, I'm finished doing white women's work. I'm done with it, you know. And so so the idea that we have to or that we even can control the way people interpret our work, it's not our job. Like, our job is to liberate and free ourselves, to, you know, be our ancestors' dream, whatever that means to you. And so if that means that you shake your butt on stage, then you shake your butt on stage. You know what I mean? Because I find that what happens in these clubs, what happens in the streets, then gets taken and put on a Beyonce video, and then it's art, and then it's acceptable, and then it's not just Beyonce, but everyone, all the pop stars, right? And all the stuff that we are shamed for then gets to be beautiful on this, or revolutionary on that, or thought-provoking, or whatever, or geniuses is what they call them. And it's like, that actually comes from sex work, the way that we touch our bodies, the way that we understand ourselves. And so I would like to think of us as experts, as architects. And so we get to frame this new space, this new narrative for us in the sea of white supremacy.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ravyn. I often think about miracles and what does a miracle look like, or what does it mean to say or claim something or someone as a miracle. And I when I think of that, I think of Audre Lorde saying we were never meant to survive. And in those words, like even now saying that, I get goosebumps, right? Like, I think that perhaps all of us are, you know, walking, living, breathing impossibles that are still possible, that are possible every single second of every single minute of every hour of every day, just by the sheer fact of our existence. And so I think there's something really miraculous about that. And then the various ways that we show up and show out. Can we talk a minute about style and fabulousness, and how that is directly connected to Indigenousness and to Blackness and queerness and to burlesque? Because I think it's incredible. I think that there is something really beautiful about the incredible ways that folks are able to decorate themselves and show themselves off, either on the sidewalk, just going someplace, but most definitely on the stage. And what are your thoughts on that? Because I think it's really beautiful. I think it's incredible how we do that. I think it's incredible how poor people and low income people and folks on the margins oftentimes start fashion and start trends, right? And I want to know what your thoughts are on how fabulousness and style is linked into our revolution, is linked to how we perform and how we move through the world and how we appear on stage.
I'd love to jump in on this one, Dainty. And I want to link back to what we were speaking about moments ago as well, about chronic illness, disability, and about sexuality too. I think that in answer to that question, a lot of the time, the sexuality of people who are chronically ill, of people who are facing chronic pain, or people who are disabled, or all of the above in many of our cases, is often overlooked. Oftentimes, if you are working with chronic pain, living in a disabled body, your sexuality just isn't allowed. It's not part of the question. It's not part of the equation. And whether that's when you have a visible disability or a visible chronic illness or not. And so I think that it's our job as people living in these bodies to bring that to the stage as well, because, you know, Lord knows I don't go a single day living without my chronic illness. Lord knows there's days that I'm moving on stage the way that I'm moving because that's all my body will allow me to do. And the one lovely thing that happens on stage is that I get to say how I move, and you are going to sit there and watch it. And that's it. And so if today the back bend can't happen or whatnot because my body's seizing up, fine. But guess what? It's still going to be sexy. I'm still going to find ways to be desirable, to feel my own oats because I deserve that, and to take this on stage. And it reminds me of all these fantastic disability advocates that we have out there, especially in Canada. Andrew Gurza does Disability After Dark. It's a podcast that shines a light on sex and disability, and sort of explores parts of the disabled experience that we don't often hear about. And so that part and parcel to how we decorate ourselves, how we decorate our body, so much about, for me, my lived experience and really coming into my own as an individual, as a performer, as a queer, fat, woman of color, femme, is how I decorate myself, is how I present myself, and in how the world gets to view me. Ivory the individual, Ivory the performer. Very soon those lines blurred and she became the same human, honestly. But so much about our identity is how we adorn ourselves. And I don't care if you have $10 or 10,000, it's so vital to actually be able to self-identify in how we dress, how we do our hair, how we style our makeup, and how we present to the world, because it's part of the way that we can control the way that we're consumed. Again, talking about consumption, but also the way that we're seen. And it's so, so vital to be seen. I think that's a lot of this, the underlying topic of this conversation here, and the thread that's weaving this all together is really taking up space and being seen in a world that tells you not to.
Can I build off of that for a moment? I really appreciated the offering and the connection between adornment and claiming our bodies, broken or unbroken as they may be. What I think is really sort of important for me is that Ivory worded so beautifully is like the desexualizing of the bodies of people with disabilities, right? That that it's not desirable to have a disability. It's not desirable to be unwell, and it's inconvenient for other people, right? So as a performer, I think about like, okay, I get asked to be in this show and I'm like, okay, somebody wants to use strobe lights. I'm epileptic, that I can't be in that kind of space. And like, I have to think about that, or how late the show goes and how much I'm going to be able to sleep beforehand, what that space looks like. And also the other side of it is, am I going to experience like violence in that space based on walking in this body? And then am I going to have to get on stage having experienced that and like have to like literally unravel myself to leave that part over there and to bring just the desirable parts of myself on stage? And then the other piece that I want to connect to is something that Ravyn talked to us about, which is the idea that madness doesn't exist. I called my grandmother. My grandmother was a very no nonsense person. Like, she's not the person you call for a pep talk. She's a person you call when you're just like want to be told to get it together. So I called my grandmother. Be like, I'm just like, I'm really depressed. Like, I just want to quit my job. And like, I just feel, And she says to me, oh, depression is for white girls. And I was like, what? Right? I'm like, this is my African grandmother. So I'm just trying to give her grace. I really am. And she's like, no. She's like, her understanding of depression is that it is being sad for no reason. And she said, you're sad for every reason. And I was like, okay, I get that now, right? What she was saying is that being mad in the face of crazy making circumstances is a rational response. Okay, I literally can't leave the crazy behind when it's a crazy making world. What am I going to do with that? So that to me, I think it's fair to bring that to the stage. I can't pretend that the world I live in is not chipping away at me, and I won't be whole just to make me easier to swallow, in the words of Dainty Smith from Daughters of Lilith, right? Easier to fit in your mouth, right? I can't smooth out all the sharp bits for that reason. And so I think that part of it, like, if you're gonna swallow me, I am going to be a jagged little pill indeed, right? If you're gonna consume me, I'm not gonna go down easy. And that there's a difference between being held and seen by like a queer and, you know, tender spoony filled audience than being like devoured by an audience for whom you're a subject, object, or problem, right? Like that, the ways that your body is seen inside that space. So I think also we have a role as artists radically, because we work in the space of fantasy. Dolly's talked about like you sell the fantasy, and a fantasy is an imagination of a possible future. Artists fundamentally have a radical responsibility to imagine the future. If we leave all the parts of ourselves that make us whole out of that imagination, are we not doing the work of white supremacy for white supremacy? Right? Look at white fantasy. Look at like the genre of fantasy in general. We are absent, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned. This is not the so distant future, my friend. What happens to me between now and then? Why am I not part of your imagination? If you're not going to imagine me, I'm going to imagine me. And guess what? My epilepsy is coming. My bum knee is coming. Okay. My need to nap every 4.5 hours is coming. We're all coming to the party, right? And whether you like it or not. So
I appreciate that so much. Literally everything you just said, Rania. Like, I was raised in the church, so I just want to say amen at this point, because I really appreciate that. I kind of feel like we're in virtual church right now. I want to ask folks what your thoughts are on stereotypes and archetypes. And I wanted to ask Dolly Berlin, who is Indigenous, what your thoughts on being the sexy Indigenous woman, Indigenous femme. And I wanted to like, what does it mean to be beautiful and sexy and gorgeous as a darker skinned Black woman, Kat Zaddy and Ravyn, in terms of transness and the way that your body looks in the world and on stage? What are your thoughts on archetypes and stereotypes for all of you? But I definitely want to hear, what are your thoughts, Dolly, on what does it mean to be the submissive or not submissive Indigenous person on stage?
Yes, I have made mistakes in the past and portrayed things thinking that I was being subversive, and I was super young, and like upon reflection I was like, yeah, you know what, that wasn't appropriate. I'm very, very pleased to see such a huge surge of Indigenous talent like across this continent. I think it's really wonderful. I actually like spoke with Shane Sable from Barago Nation recently, and it's just so wonderful to see so many different representations of Indigenous sexuality and two-spiritedness, or like different body shapes, body sizes, glamour girls and clowns, and so many different positive and non-stereotypical representations of that. Nobody is interested in in portraying that anymore, whether they think like, whether you're thinking of it in a subversive way or not. I think that we're very much past that. We're very much on the road of like, people want to see themselves reflected positively. In an interview with like Vice magazine, or Vice, like Vice Online, Lulu Duchesse-Derriere from Montreal had, you know, said something to the effect of basically being sick of seeing Indigenous sexuality only represented in terms of being raped or murdered. Like, that's so done, it's so over, we don't want to see that. And I think it's important to not be playing into things that excavate that image. And yeah, like just like looking forward to producing these our own fantasy versions of ourselves, and whatever that means.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I don't know anybody that hasn't stumbled though, Dolly. I don't know anybody that hasn't made mistakes and thought, oh, okay, gonna learn from that moment and maybe do that differently, or maybe not do that again. Like I'm definitely hesitant of anyone who is a perfect activist or a perfect performer or a perfect human being, because there's no such thing, right? And for certain, like writing, when they say that you're a writer, writing is just rewriting, right? Like, so I think that part of your growth as an artist is that what you would do 10 years ago, you wouldn't do now. And that's actually a good thing. I think that's actually a good thing.
For sure.
Yeah. Kat, do you have any thoughts on archetypes or stereotypes? Have you come up against any in terms of pole dance? In terms of not being a lighter skinned Black woman, what does it mean? Or have you felt particular experiences during your performance or moving through the world that affect your performances?
Yeah. So I often feel like people have this idea of what a dark-skinned woman can do versus what a lighter skinned woman can do. And I have like received comments like after shows of people coming up to me to like say, I loved what you did, but you should have done this instead. And one specific instance of this was I had an act with like a huge blonde afro wig. And a white woman came up to me afterward and she told me, oh, it was great, but I wish you didn't have that wig on. It was distracting. You shouldn't have worn that. So instances like that, and I've also been at shows where there have been lighter skinned performers or white performers with pretty much the same wig I was wearing, and just praise all around. So I just feel like as a darker skinned woman, there are still things that people feel that I shouldn't be portraying or doing on stage, which is ridiculous. So I just feel like I have to keep doing those things to show them that this is going to keep happening, and I can present myself in whatever way I want. But it is very hard to see like the lighter skinned performers being able to do whatever they want, and then when I do something that I want, it's like it's up for more of a debate, I would say.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be incredibly frustrating and infuriating. How, like, when those moments happen for you, Kat and Dolly, do you feel rage? Do you feel frustration? Because I find it interesting what people, the liberties and the, like, it's always the wrong people that have all the audacity. Like they just like, somehow they can just say things that they obviously should never have been, like should be saying, but they weren't raised manners. What happens for you in those moments? Because for me, in my lived experience, there are these moments where I understand that I'm vulnerable. I understand that I'm a Black person, I'm a Black woman. And so I have to manage my rage or manage my frustration or manage my reaction to something that's happening to me. And so I just wonder, in those moments where you're being critiqued to your face about your body, about your actual body, whatever you're putting on your body, like, how does that make you feel? And I also want to say that I think the best response to any of those criticisms is to keep on doing you, right? Like, I think that there is something really beautiful in existing and taking up space. And I would go out and buy a bigger, blonder wig, you know, like just like the largest Afro blonde wig I could find. You know, I'm a Scorpio, so I was just like, oh, okay, thank you so much. You know, and then I would just go to the store and get the biggest one, because it's just, again, it's just the nerve of some people to be able to say certain things. And I find, what happens for you in those moments, if you feel comfortable saying, like when you're receiving that criticism to your face, is it a similar experience like what I just described, where I'm managing my reaction? Do you manage your reaction before you say anything?
Yes, and I think it's an automatic, because I've been conditioned to feel like I can't react in the way that's like innate for me, which is like anger. But it's also like a calm, because I know that there's nothing I can say to that person in that moment to make them understand what they're doing. So I have a similar reaction to you, Dainty. It's just like a kind of pettiness where I'll get a bigger, blonder wig. I'll do more of what I'm doing, just to spite you and to show you that I'm not going to shrink myself, especially on a stage where I'm doing this, yes, for your consumption, but it is for me. It's for me to present myself the way I want to. So I'm just gonna keep doing me and keep doing it bigger, probably.
I love that. Dolly, did you have any thoughts you wanted to add to that? Or Ravyn, did you want to jump on that at all?
Dolly, you want to go first? And then I can go after you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Obviously being so light, I don't experience like racially motivated comments the same way that I think other Indigenous femmes would. I get a lot of body comments, a lot, like especially fluctuating weight, definitely body comments. And often it's funny, like the second that I walk away, I have like something slick that I could have said, but that opportunity is always like a couple seconds too late. Honestly, like sometimes I just like, most times it's like a big like smile and a like fuck you too, and then I walk away and then I have something much like more smart to say. But yeah, hair school has been a trip. It's microaggression city. And it is trying to find a way to manage your reaction to that, to not have everything be an argument, everything be trying to come up with ways to express that that's not appropriate. But that's obviously a much more measured environment than on stage, where I feel like it's either like a big smile and like, okay, well, have a good night, and then, or telling someone to fuck off. Like, clearly not very eloquent with my response to insults, but yeah, definitely working.
You know what? I will say, Dolly, just to support you here, fuck off is always a great response.
Fuck off is always
it's eloquent, it's intelligent, it's spiritual. Like, it's all of the things. You do not have to worry. It's a great response. Ravyn, was there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I want to speak to a couple of different things. It's okay to be an angry Black woman. It's okay to be an angry Indigenous person, angry mixed person, angry trans person. I think we make it okay for everyone else to force us to swallow our pain, our words, like, I'm tired of being managed. Like, I'm tired of managing myself around my anger, around my rage, and that stuff shows up in our bodies, right? And so it's not like it just dissipates. It actually lives inside of us. So I'd rather everyone else be as uncomfortable as I am in that moment, as opposed to me having to swallow and make it easier for them to continue to do that after, right? It's a behavior issue, where it's a learned issue, where the commenting on people's bodies, the commenting on people's art as a way to assume that they know more than you about yourself or more than you about what you're talking about is ridiculous, because they don't, right? And so when I think about fetishism, when I think about being, dark skinned Black trans person, someone just posted something and I was like, I love that. And it was like, respect my trans homies or I'm gonna be a fucking problem. Like I like, we have to be like that fucking problem for everyone else, so that we start to change this feelings of feeling like we have to fight for space, like we belong here. You know what I mean? We fight to exist in all the areas of our life. So that's one piece. And for me personally, only like 5%, no, that's generous, 3% of my performance is for the audience. You all know this about me. Those of you who are meeting me, hello. Um, only 3% is for them. Like for most of the time, I'm just working my own shit out on stage. And hopefully through me doing that, you're also doing that for yourself. But whether you do it or not, it's not my business. You know what I mean? What you take from that is not my business either. I just feel like we spend too much time trying to explain ourselves, explain our pain, explain our rage, explain our femininity, all of it. And I don't think that we owe anybody anything. And I also feel like not every audience deserves everything you have to give. And so making choices about who gets to see what is also something that we have some control over. You know what I mean? It's like not everybody is going to see my deepest, darkest, most raw work. Not every producer will get that from me. Not at all. You know what I mean? And so we have to be choosy, picky even. I'm a Virgo, so that's just how it goes. But just being picky about who gets to partake in this world that you have created, right? Where you just Rania talked about these fantasies, these ways of dreaming. Octavia Butler, like we're living science fiction, one. And so in this time of revolution, in this time of this pandemic, right, when everyone is having to like sit with their own behaviors and the behaviors of the world, maybe they can also sit with how they're treating each other. You know, maybe they can also sit with like not making Black women responsible to raise people who aren't our own kids. Like I just feel like we're always having to do the mammying, the nannying, the cradling of oppressive, destructive behavior. And it comes from wanting to be loved too. There's the way that we want to be loved, and so there's a kind of a way that we also accept being treated like shit. Personally, I don't say that just personally. And I'm done with it. Like you once said to me, Dainty, and you've said it many times to me, you are a child of God. And honestly, I laugh every time you say it, but it really means a lot to me. You know what I mean? It means a lot to me to think of my body as holy, to think of and like holy and like holy, like full in my experiences. And so I get to be all of that on stage. And what we said earlier about how there's two different sort of versions of us sometimes. It's like for me, I exist in that all the time. As a two-spirit person, I live in the two versions of myself constantly. And I found that being on stage and having spaces like Les Femmes Fatales group like that, and these incredible artists just allows me to validate my own experience. And so I don't apologize anymore. I will go out within reason, within understanding like my safety. Just as this, show up angry, you know, or uninvited, whatever it is. We're all showing up uninvited anyway. And so, yeah, before I go into more rambles, but that's sort of my piece.
No, I appreciate that so much. I really love that. I want to touch on bodies because both Ravyn and Dolly Berlin talked about body shapes and body sizes and fluctuating weights. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, all of you, on what does that mean, right? In terms of it, you know, because one of the things I've heard is there's only like, when it comes to plus size, the constraints that happen around that is that you have to have the right plus size body or else you're not sexy. So you have to be an hourglass. You don't have the stomach. You have to be shaped a particular way. If your weight goes up or if your weight goes down, it has to land in the right places. And so I think I had taken this from Ivory. I think Ivory uses this as a hashtag on her social media, but she says all bodies are good bodies, all bodies are burlesque bodies. And so I just want to hear folks' thoughts on that in terms of what happens and how it feels to appear on stage in the body that you're in. And what happens when you're off stage and you're moving through the world in this body, because there are certain things that are placed upon your body, right? Like if you're a curvaceous woman, if you're a chubby woman, if you're dark skinned, if you're androgynous, certain expectations come just because you showed up. You could have been at a coffee shop or a restaurant, anywhere. I once had someone, I was at a restaurant, and she reached out and grabbed my breasts, this woman. And I looked over at her. I was shocked. I knew her from like around the way, around community. But it was the first time we'd ever really hung out socially. And we were at like this, like a bar type or pub type situation. And when I looked, I was so shocked. I hadn't even like formed my response yet, but I remember hers, because she looked at me and she said, "I'm so sorry. I just always wanted to do that." And so I'm just wondering, you know, with the bodies that you live in and that you perform in and tell stories in, what are the experiences that come with that? And because one of the things that I always say is, I feel like feminist is a continuous walking of a tightrope. You're just walking a tightrope every single day of your life. That's what it means to move through the world, identifying or being a woman or a femme. And so I just want to hear any of your thoughts or feelings around how people appreciate or don't appreciate your body. What are the things that happened around your body, if your body is considered sexual just because you exist, right? Like you could be, like Dolly could be wearing the same low-cut tank top, just a black tank top, as a size 0 person, but is Dolly inherently, or is Rania or Ivory sexier because you have breasts and you have cleavage? Ivory, you have something you wanted to say.
This is a loaded question, man. It's strange. I have been walking that sort of razor thin line that you refer to there, between many different sort of intersectionalities. As a mixed woman, I was constantly being told I wasn't Black enough, but also being told I'm not white enough. B, as a plus size woman, half of the things I was hearing growing up were, you're not really plus size, you're not visibly plus size. And then as I championed for body positivity, as I became more of an advocate, when I won Miss Canada Plus 2007, and then sort of took my platform as let's make body positivity a thing, because back then it really wasn't what you're seeing now. It wasn't all over the internet the same way, and it definitely wasn't being picked up by big companies like Dove and, you know, Johnson and Johnson and whatnot. But then I started getting this backlash that, oh, well, you know, you don't count. You're the good kind of plus size. You're an hourglass. When the joke is, I'm like, 5 minutes ago, there was no good plus size. and wait a minute, you know, on the other side of that, I wasn't plus size enough for you 5 seconds ago, right? And so it's so easy to get wrapped up in all of the projections that people will have and all of the way that they will try to minimize, mind the pun, these things about you, or try to put them under a microscope unfairly. And I think one of the easiest things that I do, at least on stage, when I'm taking all of this with me, when I'm taking the critiques that I've heard my entire life. I used to be a competitive gymnast, and I remember in grade 3, so you're like 8 or 9 years old, getting pulled aside by my coach and told that I had to start wearing a bra because I jiggled too much when we were doing tumbling lines as we were performing, like an 8-year-old or 9-year-old. Are you kidding me? And the worst part is, God love her, my mother got in on it because she was our choreographer at the time. And she ganged up with my coach, and they had to strap down my juvenile breasts because, God forbid, they might jiggle when I'm tumbling. Like I'm literally doing backflips in this fat jiggly body, but it was apparently making audiences uncomfortable. So I guess I could say, been making audiences uncomfortable since 1993. And that's partially my job, you know? And also, like Ravyn was saying, it's also not my job to unpack your grievances with my body when I'm on stage, because that's my time. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make it jiggle if I want to. And if it doesn't, or it does, great, cool, no problem. I've been contemplating doing an act to Wipe Out that's literally just me jiggling jiggling every piece of my body that can jiggle, like right down to an earlobe for the entire song. just because I want to have fun and see if I can jiggle everything. And I'm sure people will get weirded out by it, but other people will, yeah, like the people in the chat right now are like, yeah. And yeah, like, why not? You know, it's like, what the fuck ever. These are the kind of things that you take with you everywhere you go anyways. Your body goes with you. It doesn't matter if you try to shrink it or stuff it up or shut it up. Guess what? It's still going to be with you until it's not. And then you're screwed because it's gone. So you might as well just own it, shoot the sensors, and have fun with it when you're out there, because people will always give themselves license and agency to weigh in on things, mind the pun, especially including your weight and your size and how much space you take up. So you dictate how you take that space up, and nobody can take your power from you. That is your power, period.
I love that. I love that. Ivory, please jiggle everywhere. And can you eat cake while you're doing it? Because I will pay top dollar to see you eat cake and jiggle. I'm just saying. Yeah. Dolly, sorry, you look like you wanted to say something about or jump on the train of what we were saying, or am I just being a mean teacher and I'm just pointing at you? Because we can move on. That's okay.
No, I mean, like, Ivory said a lot of really wonderful, succinct things. And honestly, fucking Ivory used to kill it at Sinfuls. She would kind of do a bit with like, everyone flap your arms, everyone, like, you know, and people loved it. So, you know, there's totally ways to get the audience on your side in terms of that. I think, you know, whatever. It does also play into a lot of like kind of what we were talking about with chronic illness. There are so many performers that are working with chronic illnesses. It is a lot. And I'm just hoping, actually, one thing that with this downtime with COVID is that a lot of people who live without these chronic illnesses become more compassionate. I think because some people are being forced to realize, like, calling in sick isn't something to be shameful. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed of that. And I'm really hoping that when we kind of get to go back to more regular stages, that being kinder with each other in terms of that, bodies, different abilities, fluctuating abilities, you know, sometimes someone can literally one day be like a rock star rolling around on the floor and the next day they're bedridden. And like, you know, I just hope that we can kind of be a little bit kinder and more compassionate to that going forward, and have that perspective.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, I think that this period of time has radically changed us on a global scale. Like, we have been profoundly changed, whether we wanted it or not. It happened. And so going back to whatever our new normal will be, our new reality, because normal is gone now. Normal no longer exists. But moving forward and blooming and thriving and surviving forward and arriving in the new reality, I think that in some ways, we have no choice but to be more patient with ourselves and with each other. We have no choice but to be kinder. I think that life is, Ravyn touched on this as well. And I have felt this personally in my life. You know, I don't know that we can push through anymore. I don't know that we can play through the pain anymore, because our bodies will rebel, right? And because we are actually deeply spiritual beings, then I think that our spirit is attached to the body, right? And so moving through the world, all the things that we survive on a daily basis means that our bodies are no longer willing to, you know, be soldiers in a particular way or just patch itself up so that we can keep going for the next struggle or the next hustle. We have to work differently. We have to perform differently. And as audience members and as storytellers, the work that we produce and create will be different. It's already different. It's already changed. And so, yeah, I think the audience will be kinder, because I think that people have been stripped down bare. We've sort of been beaten into submission. I want to let folks know, by the way, that because we had thank you so much, Mercury retrograde, because we had such difficulties at the beginning of the talk, this artist talk has been extended to 8:15. So I'm not going to keep y'all any further than that, but we just wanted to give a little bit of a cushion in space and time for anything brilliant that our artists have to say and anything that the audience has to say. We just want to leave a little bit of time for that. And I cannot stop thanking you all for being so patient. Lord have mercy. I swear to goodness. I like every single push-pull event, perfectly fine, perfectly fine, perfectly fine. And I don't know. Jesus is just having a time. Jesus is having a time, or somebody up there is. So yeah, I wanted to talk about holiness, and I wanted to touch on that before we opened up space with the audience to ask you lovely folks any questions that or feedback or thoughts that they might have. I have always believed that holiness is inherently just completely intertwined with sexuality and with performing. It's how I've always approach burlesque. It's how I approach storytelling as a storyteller. And in my mind, there is no separation. And I believe that as Black bodies and Indigenous bodies and queer and trans bodies, I think that we are holy. I think that we are holy childs of God's. And I want to ask folks, because when I think of a cabaret space, just the same way I think of a theater space when you go to see a play, and the same way I think of a Broadway space, the same way I think of film, just go into a regular, go in to watch a shoot 'em up film. I say shoot 'em up because that is my secret love. It's embarrassing. And the last time I went to the movie theater, speaking of feminists and moving through the world, I went to see Hobbs and Shaw. I was the only girl in the theater. Only girl. I'm not even exaggerating. I looked. The theater was full of men, just dude bros, just men. And there was Dainty with her little purse. And I just came to watch The Rock blow some stuff up. I have a secret love for guy movies. Anywho, I really think that all of these spaces are actually sacred. I think that there's something holy in them because they are a place where we gather, right? And in the Bible, in Judeo-Christianity, wherever you gather together, Jesus said, sorry, my daddy's a pastor, so I come by this honestly. I can't help it. Wherever 2 or 3 people gather together, that's a church, right? And Dolly Berlin, Sinful Sundays, I believe that's what it's called, Toronto's Temple of Teas. I believe that bars and cabaret spaces and venues are actually sacred spaces. And I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that they are? Because I think that they simply are. They're divine and they're holy. And the beings and the persons that perform on those stages are divine and holy as well. What are your thoughts?
You want to go ahead, Ravyn? I can go after you.
Oh, okay. I'll do a little bit. In terms of bars, I think of nightlife, and I think about nightlife because as a trans woman and trans people, a lot of the ways that we celebrate ourselves is at night. It is in the club scene. It is in the ballroom scene. It is in creating these pageants and these understandings of ourselves as full functioning humans in a society that has completely rejected us, and have had to had to revolutionize ourselves. And now that's all over the world, and now everybody's voguing, and it's a whole thing. That's a different story. But I feel like clubs and drag queens and burlesque performers and cabaret performance is storytelling, and storytelling comes from these long traditions of before colonization. And sort of this reminder of us coming together in a different way, in a new way, in a fun and experiential way. And I was thinking about it was going to a club and seeing a drag queen, Fonda Cox, here in Toronto, that actually pushed me to create my own dance company, because I realized that I wasn't seeing anything that looked like that where I was taking class in institutionalized systems. I didn't see anything that affected an audience like that moved a room, that made people feel like alive and like this is where they're meant to be. And I've had that experience multiple times at our burlesque shows, where I'm witnessing something on stage that I would have never seen otherwise. And it makes me feel more real and more realized. And then I get to walk in the world really differently and make change in the world really differently. So I highly, fully believe in the in the club, bar, nightlife scene as holy and divine.
Thank you, Ravyn.
Thank you.
Did anyone else want to respond to that, and then we can open up to questions?
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to sort of pick up on what Ravyn said about not only the holy, but I think also the sacred, right? So much of what we bring into that space are things that are sacred to us, parts of ourselves that we hide in the daytime, in our muggle jobs, if we have them, in our spaces that we don't get to bring our whole selves to. Right. And so the sacred parts of ourselves, we often get to bring to the stage in a way that we're not allowed in other spaces. I also think what is sacred is how we are with one another in those spaces. I think the cultures of work out in the world are like very much violent and transactional and extractive and fetishizing. And then I think about like, just like the ways that we show up for each other at shows, or the ways that we even do our work. I think like, even, you know, if you work, when I was younger, I trained as a dancer, and when Ivory was sharing that story about gymnastics, I was like, that was my life, because at some point in time in the 4th grade, my ballet teacher came and said, "You're gonna have huge boobs. You should just quit now." Right? It was like, you should just quit this right now. You're never gonna have the right body for ballet, so cut that out. You're wasting your time and your money. And so definitely these kinds of like really violent systems that shape performance cultures. And then you think about like, you know, working with someone like Ravyn as a choreographer, the question isn't do this thing, execute it, is how's your body, is the platform or the starting place. Can I do this in a way that your body can be there in the, you know, in the conversation, and can be part of how things are being done, and isn't just being asked to execute something. The ways that we even show up for each other after a show. I've seen Ivory countless times being like, okay, you look like you're tapped out. Let me just make sure you get home okay. Right? Or like somebody coming up and saying, hey, I just brought rice and there's rice in the dressing room. And like just the ways that we care for each other and we hold each other and we allow each other to come whole into those spaces, to me, are part of the sacred. And then also just like you really catch the spirit at a femmes show. You catch the spirit in a big way. And I you know, you feel it in the audience, you feel the people who are like reacting, you know, the people who know what's coming and the people who are just waiting for what's new. Like when Ivory does Human, right? That's one of my favorite pieces. You know, the people who know the piece who are like, yes, this is my part, right? And then you know the people who are like, oh, what's happening? What's next? And they're watching the audience watch Ivory. And it's just like this kind of, you're in this really special, holy space that's kind of like surreal and wonderful and whole and like, and also it's a space that's really vulnerable. And I think that's sacred. Right, a lot of the pieces that people bring to the stage are not like quote unquote classic burlesque. There are classic elements, or there are classic burlesque performances that have been part of that stage, but they're pieces that are like, here's something I'm grieving, here is someone I love, here's an experience that speaks to me, here's a way I feel about my body. And I think that invites people into a sacred relationship with performance that is fundamentally anti-colonial, fundamentally freedom oriented, because it rejects the transaction of you give me money and I give you the fantasy that you want or you think you want.
Absolutely. I love that, Ron.
What is religion but a place for people to gather, hopefully get get information and something that inspires them to be better people, to learn, and to get healed, to find faith, to find community, to find hope. If that's what religion is, if that helps us organize, find purpose here, if that helps us find hope to keep going on, find strength when we have none, find community, find places we can see ourselves and see each other, then yeah, this is holy. Yes, this is my religion, art and artists, and this resilience, and you know, the way that we hold each other in these spaces. Yes, that's holy to me. That's faith. And that's what divinity looks like.
Yeah, that was a sermon right there, Ivory. Thank you. I loved that. Yeah. I mean, again, that's something I've always believed in. And again, if you've ever been to Sinful Sundays, which Dolly Berlin has produced for, I think, over 5 years, that's the tagline, Toronto's Temple of Teas, and you come to worship, right? And for me, what I think is so radical about a space like that, that's been so beautifully curated, is that you're worshiping femmes, you're worshiping feminized folks, and you're worshiping women and non-binary folks on that stage, and they're all beautiful and they're all glorious, right? And I think that is revolutionary, that is radical, and it's life-changing. It's life-changing. I just wanted to ask the audience if anybody had any questions that we can present that to the artist right now. And I wanted to apologize to our wonderful audience because our ASL folks will be leaving at 8 p.m. exactly. And so any questions that happen in the few minutes before we wrap up will not be provided by ASL, and we apologize for that. While we're waiting for questions, I wanted to ask you, Dolly, was it you that came up with the tagline, Toronto's Temple of Teas? Because I love it.
Yeah, I didn't name the show. So when I took it over, I kind of just wanted to give it a little bit more of a whole feel. At one point we were talking about sort of making it a, like we used to do a thing called Confessions, which was like a little contest, but things got a little we took that out. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to give it a bit more of a, make it feel like mine. So I was like, I gotta come up with a tagline.
Temple of Teas. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions from our audience? We're just gonna wrap up, but before we do, I just want to leave a little bit of space and time for that. How long have folks been performing? Like, how long have you all been performing in terms of burlesque? I know all of you have been performing in multiple ways as artists and educators and activists for a long time. And do you find that your art shifts over the years?
I can answer that. Yes. Of course it did. Of course it did. I just embraced being self-centered on stage.
Nice.
It's the only place it's allowed. So for me, I was just like, this is great. I just get to be my full ridiculous self and just try different things, you know, and fail too. And that's it. That, like, we get to sort of fail, and the wigs fall off, and the tassels fall off, and you know, you get to show people that we are working with everything that we got. And there's something really amazing about having that experience in front of people and trusting yourself in front of people. And also for me, as someone who has had a body privilege in terms of the way that people have celebrated my body. Of course, that was before before I came out as trans, and now it's completely different, right? But before then, it was, you know, oh, this is the perfect body, and then I would have questions about, like, oh, is it okay that I cover my chest because I don't feel comfortable with having my chest out? Like, I don't feel comfortable with that. No, you have a great body. Just go. People would kill for your body. Like, comments like that pushed me and forced me within dance, which is seen as this like completely open field, but it's not. You know, to be in a space where I could decide how I wanted to represent my body, how I wanted to show up, was revolutionary. And so I've been doing it for about 6 years. Seriously. I think I dabbled a minute in the femme fatales, then I disappeared, and then I returned. Because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what my body wanted to do. So I really had to go back and think about what it meant to be intentional on stage. Because as a dancer who had been the vessel for other people's ideas and dreams and fantasies, I didn't know what mine was. And so it's allowed me to develop that space for myself. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravyn. I appreciate that. We have a question. Would anyone like to comment on how art can and does play a role in activism?
I can start, and then I'm sure everyone has got stuff to add to this, because I don't think anybody here, I don't know, I don't think there's anything that is art that is not political. I mean, people talk about, art not being political all the time. And to me, like, if you're make art that's not political, you're not an artist. You're a purveyor of decorative things. And that's fine. It's a job, but it's not an artist. I think what's really critical to remember is, like, James Baldwin often talks about this idea of artists having to tell the truth or to vomit up the anguish, right? There's a particular way in which art doesn't only say, here's the wound, right? But rejects this notion of having to make the wound beautiful. And you could just sit in the ugly, and that's okay, right? And that's worthy in itself. I think art functions as healing, and that the most explicit expression of solidarity and justice that we can give one another is space enough to heal. Otherwise, what's the point? We're going to be in this place forever, right? Just sitting inside systems of injustice for all of perpetuity, because we know hurt people. And if we never heal, we pass on our traumas generation to generation, and we're stuck here. And I would rather not be stuck here, ideally. So I think part of the ways that art is activism is, first, it serves to document that we were here in a world that tries to erase us. We exist. Here are the ways that we existed. Second, it allows us to leave evidence of that existence and evidence of our resistance for our descendants, just as our ancestors have for us. So we can build on that. We're not without ancestors. We're not without tools. We're not starting from nowhere. And then finally, art does that radical and extraordinary thing of imagining a future that we can come to with all of our parts. And that is one of the biggest functions of systems of injustice is the capturing of our imaginations. First, through this idea of inevitability. Everything we're inside of is inevitable. Injustice is inevitable. Climate crisis is inevitable. Scarcity is inevitable. Hunger is inevitable. Inevitable. This is the inevitable course of humanity. That captures your imagination. If it's scarce and it's inevitable, there isn't enough, and this is where we're going anyway, why bother? Then comes the other way that injustice captures your imagination, which is keeping you in the fucking hustle. Right? When you're hustling constantly, you're going to 2 jobs, you're doing laundry, you're trying to stay on top of your responsibilities, you're worried about losing your housing. Where the fuck is the time for dream up freedom, fam? I'm still dodging calls from my phone company. Like, I don't have time for dream up freedom right now, right? So it captures your imagination in a very practical way. So resisting the capturing of our imagination is one of the primary ways that we resist and reject systems of injustice. We don't accept their version of history. We don't accept their notions of inevitability. We reject their wars. We reject their bullshit. And in fact, we dare to dream up something better. And in fact, it doesn't have to be perfect. If this system has been failing us for 500 years, we can fuck up for 50 in service of something better. It will still be acceptable. So to me, art is the fundamental way that we are present in and resisting to this world. And the best part about it, my friend, is it doesn't ask you to be foolishly hopeful. Like, hope is not a prerequisite for resistance. You can make sad and tragic art. There's a space for it. If that's how you feel, we'll work it out. But it's not this idea that you must come to it with this perfection or beauty or this false positivity that doesn't actually speak to your experience. Hope is not a prerequisite for resistance. The only prerequisite is that we reject our conditions as they are. And art allows us the opportunity to articulate that.
Absolutely. That was absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much for everything that you said, Rania. And thank you so much for everything that you had just said before that, Ravyn. I want to thank all of you for spending 2 hours with me. We got off to a bit of a rocky start, but I really appreciate your patience, and I appreciate you sharing your intellect and your passion and your thoughts on art and performance and the racialized body and the radicalized body. Thank you so, so much to Ivory, to Ravyn, Zaddy, Rania. Thank you, Dolly Berlin, for being your incredibly glorious, holy, and magnificent selves. And we're going to end the chat and the talk tonight with that. And I would like to leave all of you with these words, which is that you are a holy child of God. Thank you for existing in this world. Thank you for being part of the Push-Pull Project. Thank you for saying yes to every single idea I have. I appreciate it. Thank you for showing up and bringing your heart and your talent to the dreams that I have for myself and for all of you, because all of you are included in my dreams. When I dream of getting free, I dream not only of me, but I dream of you too. So I want to thank you for coming along on the ride with me. It means the world. And thank you so, so much to our wonderful, incredible audience. Thanks for showing up and sharing virtual space with us. We truly appreciate it. And the Push-Pull Festival will keep going. We will keep dreaming. We will work out glitches. We will still be fabulous. I will reapply my lipstick in between and drink tea that might have something else in it. And we will make glorious art. Thank you all. And we will see you for the very next event. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Dainty, for holding such a beautiful space for all of us.
Thank you all, and all your brilliance.
Thank you, guys. Every single one of you are magic, whether you're in the audience, you're hosting, or you sat on this panel. I know that I'm inspired to be part of this revolution with all of you. Good night.
Good night.
I miss you all. So nice to hear your voices. Thank you, Dainty, for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.